If that's the bar, then I think we're all famous.
I was like, oh, I really want to read his post. I'm glad he's posting. I should go read that at some point.
Yeah,
I'm glad he decided after a year and a half that what he's working on makes sense. It's great.
Take a while. I decided to try and upset more people, so we'll see how it goes.
Did you say that iceberg is garbage? Did you like really just shit on some stuff?
I just said that they could be improved.
Oh yeah. Ooh, I like that. That's a good one. Tables could grow horizontally and vertically. Oh yeah, I like that. There's a good meme. It is messy. That's memeable. Come on. Data evolution is greater than schema evolution. Did you have someone work with you on this? Did you have ChatGPT write this shit?
No, I just went on a bunch of long jogs.
Wow, that's awesome. Oh man, this looks like it might be required reading for people. Oh, look at the X tables in there. Oh, diffusion! Yay! I'm thinking that drawing is something that was not done by ChatGPT.
No, yeah.
You guys should go read it. If you haven't seen it, here, I'll post it here. I'm sorry.
You can post it in the notes as the pre-item of what is Jack's talking about.
Yes, exactly.
I think I say substrate in there somewhere, so we can.
Let me search. I don't know. I doubt it.
Oh shoot! No, I don't.
Oh, the only place it is in your like tagline of the author.
All right, I'll put it. I'll put it in the integration section. All right, I'll fix that.
Substrate is garbage.
No.
It's good to see you all. I haven't seen you for a few weeks.
Yeah.
Substrate was also mentioned in SQL or Death. What's his name's seminar series.
There's a seminar series, Sequel or Death.
That sounds like Andy Pavlov.
Yeah. They had a Sane IR gave a talk, and they were
Sane IR.
Yeah, it used to be, I think, Sane SQL, and then they were saying, "Oh, we need a standardized IR," and then they said Substrate is too logical and tries to work with multiple dialects and engines versus just mandating one that everyone has to use.
Isn't there a comic about that?
But we don't have.
We came up with a standard to replace all the standards.
All right, we got a lot of items on the agenda, so let's get going.
All right.
Yeah.
Someone's got to be the boss here. Make it happen.
Right off the bat, this was just a quick field report. I gave a talk at the Apache Calcite annual meetup. They might be doing them more frequently, but I built an example system called ColorsDB, which is like a free color system of free data sources of like an executor in Calcite, kind of show how you can wire Calcite into IS, or how to do planning for federated queries and then get the plans out into Substrate using Isthmus. There's some more work I want to do in it. I might eventually try and bring that into the Substrate umbrella, but there's a presentation, there's code in the system so you can actually run it. It's got like TPCH queries that you could run. Well, it's got the TPCH schema, you can run TPH schema and does some planning. It's still very immature. There's a bunch of stuff I want to add to it, but as a starting point for other people, I find it might be helpful to bootstrap people who want to use Calcite for stuff, and I've had a bunch of questions about it in the community overall. But yeah, that exists.
Such a strong statement. That exists.
It exists. I signed up for a talk, and I was like, cool, I've been meaning to build this for a year. Now I have a deadline.
Are you saying the talk is available or coming up soon?
The talk should be available. It was recorded. I will go follow up with the Calcite folks about it if I haven't heard from them by the end of the week.
Did you post? Do we have a place where we put links on this kind of stuff on the Substrate website?
Potentially. When it's up, I'll make an action item for myself to.
Post it on the mailing list too.
Yeah.
We want to get that one mail in there every month.
It's the
widest mailing list.
A month already. This would be 3. That's excessive.
Oh, really? Oh, that's good. Now I'm confused.
I post the reminder for the meeting every. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah. Oh, I need this meeting. It's a light meeting. It's good.
All right, so I have a list of PRs that are pending that probably could use some discussion. The roll-up cube grouping expansion one, I think, Doc, you have the most context.
Oh yeah, I kind of got distracted. I get some feedback, and then it was just like, oh man, it's one of those ones where you have to think a lot, and it's like, does anybody have an opinion on this? Apparently, the databases can do all sorts of stuff that's just ugly as shit.
Isn't this making it less epic?
We don't need roll-ups and groupings unless you're going to have a ridiculous number of columns, which is, I say, suppose the motivation for this thing. They probably have more than just like 4 columns, and yeah, and I can see that the current specification for roll-ups and groupings would be excessive in that case.
Oh, he said he was going to. Okay, so I feel less bad about not getting back to this because he said he was going to propose an alternative pattern, and then he did not.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's like you can do all sorts of mixing of things, and so everything's expressible with the current thing, but some of the stuff is verbose to express it now, and there could be a more compact way to express it. And so he's arguing for the more compact way, but his design was confusing. Like it required a lot of implicit knowledge in order to be able to work with it. And so I was asking whether or not he can come up with an alternative. Like his points around, to me, it's like the in clause, right? The fact that we have a, whatever it's called, single in list and single or list and multi or list or whatever they're called, which are effectively in clauses in SQL. You can obviously express that by having a bunch of or functions with multiple arguments. But there's something nice about the compact or equality statements, basically. There's something nice about the compact, simple representation of an in clause. And so having a representation like makes sense. His argument here is the same thing exists for these kinds of statements, that there's a compact representation, and rather than having to like expand it before you can convert it to substrate, like have the compact representation as well, which I think makes sense. But I think we need to, he asked me a question, so I can respond to his question, but I think we need to ping him and say like, hey, can you, him, she, her, that person, whatever. Yeah, so I'll take on myself to put a comment on that.
I think I'm a +1 on the compact representation, especially where it's like we were saying that it can expand to like hundreds of columns, and that makes the plans even harder to read than they already are. So having a bit of sugar there is probably good. It also means you're less likely to make mistakes. But to your point, if you can make it, explicit or either document the exact procedure for converting them would be ideal.
Yeah. Well, and there's just like the way he represented it was like, okay, we're gonna use some parallel arrays kind of stuff to try to match with the existing stuff, but then enhance it. And I was just like, this probably should just be an alternative representation.
Yeah, that should be a message type.
Yeah. So anyway, so yeah, okay, I'll work with them on that. Them. I'll work with them on that. Another pronouns.
All right, second one, max points.
Max points.
Oh, that's a BPR. I think I need to revisit that and see if the test system supports, the generic parameter things. I forgot the name for them because PTS has a precision thing in it. I've been meaning to. I forgot about this. I can get back to it.
I don't know what PTS is. Is that precision timestamp?
Precision timestamp.
Oh yeah.
So
it looks like what I would expect it to look like.
This is more. I think I added this because we were missing max peak, or we have a max but not a min, and I was like, oh, we should just add this. And then I was like, oh, I think Jax was like, we should add a test for this, and I don't disagree with that. But I just hadn't gotten around to doing that, and also I wasn't. Part of this, I'm not sure if we can include like their generic params in the test yet, or that would require.
Well, you would put concrete params in the test, right? Are you saying
I would use concrete params, but I don't know if can I do like PTS 5 plus PTS 5, PTS PTS6 plus PTS6 equals something versus PTS3 plus PTS6 equals error.
There actually may be no support in the test framework for precision timestamps.
Yeah, but I would say like you wouldn't add like, yeah. You don't say use this function with this argument type, right? You say use this function and pass it argument types.
Okay, I'll take a look at the test framework. If it's easy enough to add, I'll do it. Otherwise, I may just ask to get it merged in. Because there's already there's a maximum.
I did approve it. I didn't say like.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I said approved, but would love a test case.
Cool.
Yeah. So I'm not trying to block it on a test case, but I was like, oh, wouldn't it be nice to have a test case?
Yeah.
Oh, no, this is more. I think I did this, and I have to go away
it's
for
not
reasons.
possible. Yeah. L trim, R trim, trim.
Trim.
Yeah. This seems like it's ready. It just needs a second approval.
So it's just additional parameters and a bunch of test cases.
Yeah, I think it's varchar support for Ltrim, I think is what it is.
Yeah. And string.
But then it's an overload where the characters to be removed are white spaces. There is no Ltrim or Xtrim version where it always returns white space. You have to provide which characters should be removed. And this is an overload where that defaults the character set to white space.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Do we have other places that we do this? I think we had a conversation about this before, and I was on one side of this, but I'm just going to ask on the other side. This is a function where the implementations, I think I argued that we can do this, but it's a function where there's implementations that have different numbers of arguments. I think the spec allows it. And this seems like
they have different signatures.
Yeah, they have different signatures. Yeah, so yeah, implementations have different signatures in the same top-level function block. I think the spec allows it. I think in this case it's fine because the semantics are the same. It's just like a default value. I think in another case I've seen like this where it's a completely different behavior. I was arguing that it probably shouldn't be the same function, top-level function definition.
Yeah, that would be confusing.
So I think it's probably fine in this case, but I just wanted to ask that question to see how other people agree.
Yeah, I think especially because also like Ltrim and Rtrim with like the default arg are like it's in MySQL, it's in Postgres. I think looking at Trino, it only has Rtrim for white space and not the other ones, which is interesting. But yeah,
because Meta doesn't believe in
it's like a
white space.
Weird default because it's like normally you have to put in a string, and this is more like a regular expression. But I agree.
Oh, that's funny. Victor, a technical recruiter at Datadog, just reached out to me. Is she on this call and reaching out to all of us? All right, what's next on the list?
Virtual table.
Virtual table.
Yes, so this is a virtual table, another way of expressing virtual tables. The idea here is to express it as with a single expression that returns basically a table, a virtual table, so that they could put in, basically replace the entire thing with dynamic content, or part of it, well, even part of it, but basically a table value function. And so then trying to figure out how to fit that in, because, well, it can't be, it doesn't make sense for this to be like the way to provide all value content, because many systems don't have support for complex types like structures and lists and such. And so making them be able to support those kinds of expressions just to be able to use virtual tables means that you basically are making it complicated for dumber or simpler execution backends.
So
Do we
before we
understand?
had before we had a list of expressions in protobuf.
Originally, it was a
have
list of literals. Now
list
it's
of
a list
literals,
of
okay.
but that's
now it's
that's
one
been
expression that
deprecated.
returns a list.
Now
No, it's a list of expressions.
now it's a list of expressions, and then the new proposal is a single expression that returns a list of structs, I guess.
The high level question to me is what he really wants is having dynamic binding for a relation. I read this as like I want dynamic binding for a relation, not a virtual table.
Why is it dynamic?
I mean, he hasn't mentioned it here, but I
would call
Like-
dynamic binding for relations something else where you're like choosing between a read or a scan or a project or
the
join
very
at
last
runtime.
sentence of his comment, he says it allows using a single dynamic parameter expression to represent the records in a virtual table. So I didn't come up with this. I was like, wait a minute, did I come up with this idea that it was a dynamic thing? Yeah, so he added dynamic bindings, right, to the expression type. And now I feel like he's trying to overload virtual table to take advantage of that. And my inclination is that it's just like, why not just make it its own thing? Like a table type, which is like a bind table type, which binds to a parameter, which is rather than overloading virtual table. I don't know. It's just a weird.
That was actually one of the alternatives that he mentioned in the discussion thread.
Mhm.
And that would be cleaner. That's true.
That my inclination is that because I kind of feel like to me it's a dynamic relation. Like actually, it's an interesting question. It's a dynamic relation. So can I pass a plan? I'm trying to think about like.
You still know what the type is at the end, right? The type is still known. It's still got to be this list of structs with a particular types in that struct.
You may not know how many there are easily.
Like how many rows?
Yeah.
Or how rows you don't need to know, do you? It's the columns that are the
No.
problem.
Yeah.
Does it declare the columns somewhere?
I think they're
If
probably
it's just one expression, it would be on the return type of the expression.
Kind of
Unless it is a bound expression, it's like you. Oh yeah, we required for the dynamic expressions, we required the type to be specified, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm so curious about
I'm
what the use case for this is.
I was still stuck on the Esperanto comment from earlier, but anyway.
We have I mean, this also feels somewhat like the name table. Do we have a named table? Or maybe that was the Sarah thing.
We have a name table. Yeah.
We have a name table concept.
But this is different, right? This is like a situation where I have a plan, but the plan is going to access a table. Here's my question. Yeah, it's like, but the virtual the records are coming for the plan later, or going to be bound separate.
I don't
Like
want to
an
know what
API.
this is for. Like what's the actual use case for this? Like, is this the
Here's the question I have is that like we can already solve this with the existing thing by using do we have a flatten? We didn't add a flatten yet, did we?
Latin for
We
what?
got
In what
unmatched,
context?
yeah.
Like a lateral explode, whatever it's called, like
Oh no, we don't have an unnest yet.
a nest. Yeah, there you go. There's another word for it. A nest, flatten, whatever. Flatten, I think, was the Google name, the first Google name. I wonder if we should do it that way, right? Because what's really happening here is like if you could just put this in this situation, you could just have the binding be in one literal. That could be the one column in that table, and then there could be an unnest operation, which takes that and then rolls it to records. Which is what he like. That's what this is encapsulating, right? Is that like I'm going to put a struct here, an array of structs, and then I want those to unroll as a table. So that might I'm wondering whether that's actually like we should just add a nest.
That's kind of what I want to understand exactly what they're trying to do. Because like this feels like it's an approach to solving whatever problem that they have, but it does feel weird to kind of add this kind of function into a virtual table. When I think of a virtual table, it's very much like I'm embedding data into the plan that I know. If I wanted like inject data, I would have to use. The virtual table also doesn't make sense for me there. Where like the point is, it's like it's a table embedded in the plan, and I guess
No,
when
I
you combine that
think,
plus dynamic. It does all kind of meld together, but
Virtual table is like a values class, and they just want to replace the values class.
yeah, they want a single variable to be an array of structs that replaces a value class, because the values class is an array of structs, right?
Seems very.
But I think that argument would have been valid against allowing arbitrary expressions to create a nested struct, and we didn't follow I don't know. That argument wasn't followed at the time, right? We have now expressions to create a struct.
Sorry,
You can now use the nested logic to create a struct.
Yes.
From other objects.
There's already dynamicity for creating the content of the virtual table.
I think they have a situation where they're going to get an argument in like from an external system of the virtual table after they've gotten the initial plan built, but they know the schema ahead of time. I don't think they can do that right now.
We used it frequently. I mean, we use name table frequently in Acero just because we were too lazy to really
do anything.
I have a pi arrow table, turn this into a virtual table. That serialization logic seemed like all it works. So it's like, well, I'll just make a name table and then I'll bind it externally.
Yeah.
Actually thinking about this, if they want the expression to be a list of struct, they could just declare multiple expressions. Like we already sort of support this. They just use a repeated field for what it is.
No, so like
They want the expression to be a single node. That's a binding.
They're going to have a binding later. They don't want to bind, like they don't know how long the list of records is going to be. It could be the virtual table is going to be 6 records. It could be 45 records. I don't know. I want to have the plan built, and then I'm going to be swapping in what the data is in the virtual table through the plan. Right?
Oh, they want to bind the whole struct, not just like an element in the struct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they want to bind the whole struct as a table.
So
like
you
array of structs.
You could create a table with a range function, right? You could say range 0 to 20, and then you would get a list with 20 entries and turn that into a table.
So I agree with that statement, except for what you just said there. It's like, if they're doing that, I just want to implement range. I want table value functions if that's what they're trying to do.
The question I would have is that if we add a nest, are they golden?
Yeah, like from a consumer perspective, I think a nest as the solution is just fewer things to implement that do the same thing.
And with greater generality.
I want to avoid having too many ways to do the same thing that are kind of similar, except for like very specific edge cases, because it makes the API quite confusing to know like what's the best way to build this when it's like, well, these are equivalent except for this one edge case.
That almost sounded like consensus.
Yeah.
I'm just writing it in the comment. Just look at the comment I just added to the PR and see what you think of it.
Okay. All right. Precision time. I went back and looked back in March last year. We talked about precision time. It's about time to get to talk about it again.
I appreciate you being precise about when we last talked about precision time.
So I we're very surprised that we didn't add precision time when we added precision timestamp. I suppose that means we should spend the time to actually implement precision time now. I don't, there were no objections last time. I'm just checking, make sure that we haven't changed our mind, that we still think we need a precision time instead of the one that's only microseconds.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. We have arbitrary precision, everything else. We should probably do that and like have a general.
Does someone actually need it?
You do.
Do I? Put your brain on my fucking parade. That is bullshit, man.
I mean, I could go back. I'll talk to my boss and see what he says, but
And we're the ones pushing it. Snowflake has it.
Snowflake has it.
It goes down past. It goes lower than microsecond. Like what fucking way is that?
Yeah, their default is nano.
Default is nano.
Yeah.
You ever like tried to like get a computer to tell you nanoseconds, and like every number you get is like 300 nanoseconds later? Like it's like there's only like three versions of nanoseconds that you get. It's like 333, 666, or 999 or whatever it is. Like
well,
and that's the only nanoseconds you ever get.
Yeah, for compatibility, we're with the with precision timestamp. We'll support Pico.
So, I mean,
All
to be
right,
fair,
yeah.
I think Windows is still at, I don't know, maybe they've changed it, but it was 100 milliseconds for them that they would batch their
Oh, really?
clock
Wow.
changes in. So, or maybe it's 10 milliseconds, but it's in the milliseconds. So we've already got that problem.
I have no objections to adding precision time,
I have no objections.
especially if I don't have to do it.
Yeah, it makes me disgusted that we have to do it. But,
I was hoping I could bait Victor into doing it, but too late.
The funny
Victor,
thing
don't
is,
you want it to be consistent? Wouldn't you feel better and sleep better tonight if it was all consistent?
got enough other fish to fry. For mildly amusing fact is internally we treated timestamp as having nanosecond precision instead of microsecond everywhere internally, because that's what we were doing. And then our plan was to get precision timestamp in eventually, and someone else did it. And we're like, great.
Well, I guess the community is providing you value. That's good.
That actually has been a legitimate selling point internally. It's been like, there's a bunch of stuff we want to get done that other people do for us. I'm like, this is great, cool.
That's
This
how
is
it's
what open
supposed
source
to work.
means.
It's so weird that's like, you're like, oh, that's nice that an open source project that happens. You're like,
Yeah.
isn't that supposed to be what open source is about? Anyway,
I took it more as I was treating it more as an indication the community has gotten large enough that there are people doing work that's tangentially related to things that we want for free. Like there's it's more than just us doing Substrate Java stuff. And Substrate.
you guys gonna get rid of that native compilation at some point? You guys have that strategic discussion?
What now?
Let's put it on the agenda. We can talk about it. I think we're pretty good to talk about.
All right, best effort filter is next.
This may just be more of a thing that's come up a bit in data fusion side of things, trying to figure out how to map best effort filter and filter into the system and out of the system where the language is a bit imprecise. I might link to a thread where I've been trying to figure out the mapping. It would be useful probably to have examples of how it should work. Because I assume that if you have like a best effort filter, you probably need to declare the best effort filter and then also the same expression needs to be in the filter as well if you actually want it enforced, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so you need to like there's the two fields, but there's not really examples of how to use them.
Would it be helpful to have a why it exists?
Probably.
Does it make sense? Why it exists?
I understand it as in some cases you want to push like a approximate filter into your like table provider. So like you can do some filtering, but it's like the canonical example I have in my head is like index filtering, where like, hey, I want to find all the indexes that are greater than some number or like some equal something, and then it's like, cool, I can give you the entire table or the entire row in this S3, like all the columns in this S3 file, which might match, and I can exclude the ones that definitely don't match. But the fact that they're kind of in the same thing is a bit wonky. I think data fusion kind of distinguishes between the read rel operation, which has filters on it, and then the push downs into the actual table provider. So it's almost like it has two nodes that map to the read rel. Blah.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Oh, go ahead.
my experience is that there are two different, like, there are definitely readers that don't know how to filter data. Like, let's use a concrete example, right? Like with Iceberg, if I've got Iceberg tables and then I've got Avro data, let's say, because you can have Avro instead of Parquet, right? Typically Avro readers don't have predicate push down in them because Avro has to decode anything anyway, so it just fucking spits it out, right? But Iceberg has stats around files, right? And so I can use the best effort filter to filter at the stats level. But after the data gets exported, it's not an exact filter, it's a best effort filter. And so I then need to have an external system apply the second filter, the filter again, right? We want to push that logic down because we will be able to filter out files entirely if their stats don't fit inside the ranges or whatever. But then there's going to be other things where we're going to have to filter it after the fact. And so to me, it's like in cases where a table provider, there are table providers that only support best effort. That's the thing, is if a table provider supports a full filter, right? I can rely on the table provider to do the filtering, then I should just put it in the filter, right? The reason that I would put something in a best effort filter is a recognition in the plan that the table provider can do some kind of filtering, but it's not a guaranteed filter.
I guess actually thinking about it that way, if you have a filter that's actually not supported by the table provider that you're using in like the substrate, should that actually be on the read rel or should that be on a filter around the read rel? Like, should the assumption be that if there's a filter on the read rel, it is executable by the system that you're calling?
Sure.
Like, we don't have any language around that. And right now, one thing, I think what we do in calcite is that any filter on the read rel just becomes an actual explicit filter node anyways. So like, we're not really saying where it is, but my assumption was that the point of having all that on that node is to say, hey, this bundle is like push downable.
So, okay, I think the answer is yes. Like if there would have to be fulfilled, but like I can give a concrete example too. Like if I were to build a substrate consumer just for Lance, like normally we go through data fusion for that, and it kind of obfuscates this fact. But if I were building one just for Lance, we could say, if you give us a read rel with best effort but no filter, we will do a small amount of work to read that and give you back more rows than necessary. If you give us a read rel with best effort and filter, then we're going to invoke data fusion and we're going to do more work, but we're going to guarantee that for you. So it's like there would be two ways to call into Lance, and we can fulfill both ways. And so you could use it as a, if for some reason you want to do the filtering later because you have a better option, or your engine is faster or something like that, you could use the first option to tell Lance, I don't need you to filter it. I just give me best effort.
Yeah, but in some ways, the distinction that you're talking about there with data fusion is that having something on the filter invokes data fusion and not the actual table provider that you're pushing it down to. And that's kind of where I think the ambiguity is coming for me, where like if something is on the filter read rel, is it the engine or is it in the table source?
Like data fusion's consumer, it knows about best effort filters. Table providers can say inexact for filters.
Yeah.
But it doesn't, the substrate consumer doesn't actually utilize that fact at all. So the way it does it is it always just looks at filter. It ignores best effort filter entirely. And if the table provider can't provide an exact filter, then it provides it for them. Data fusion could also change their consumer to say, hey, I see that there's a best effort filter, but there's no filter, so I'm not going to insert that filter exec when I do my planning.
You might want to look at the PR that we're discussing that, because I think that what I've done in that, what I've set it for in that PR is like, if you see a best effort filter, you make it a filter in data fusion.
Okay.
So under the assumption that if you don't apply the filter, it's unsafe. But if you like, best effort is you may be able to apply it.
To clarify, best effort filter, you can always drop it.
What if there's is it valid to have a best effort filter and no filter specified on a read rel?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, you're saying drop it as in just return everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your effort may be very bad, right? Like you're just about to go on vacation and you're like, my best effort is I'm going on vacation.
Yeah. This is also
I think what you're
actually
saying-
data fusion has three things. It has exact, which is push datable, inexact, which is like not push datable, and then unsupported, which is actually this engine doesn't support it at all. So you have to make it a filter. It's got like free things. So we're trying to map this. Like,
Yeah.
trinary
Well, and
logical
I'd say inexact is best effort, right? And so in the case like
Yes.
in data fusion, if you get a filter that you need to apply and something supports inexact, you're going to need to add it as an inexact filter, and there's going to be a filter node on top that data fusion actually enforces, right?
Yeah.
Um,
It's like if you get a filter, then you always add a filter exec if the provider is not exact. If you
Right.
get a best effort filter, then you only add the filter exec if the provider is unsupported.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that statement. Yes.
You should look at that issue, Weston. We should think about it.
Yeah,
I've been having a discussion like, how does this work?
I'm always happy to just chime in on data vision. I feel like I'm guilty for never actually doing any work over there, but I'm happy to annoy
comment
them.
from the sidelines. Huh?
Yeah.
Cool. I have noticed the correct people for this. That is the aim of this discussion.
Yeah, so I was putting a comment, so I'll move on to my topic that I just added, which is multiple years ago, I created a native image of Substrate Java, Isthmus, that's what it is, Isthmus. I created a Graal native image, Grail, whatever, how you say the thing. Because I wanted to make a little CLI that would be fast and nice to play with. Okay. Through that process, at Sundeck, we decided not to use Java moving forward and to use Go. Interestingly enough, because it sucks to try to use Graal to do native stuff. It's just not, it's not mature. And given the, like, maybe it's more mature now, but like, I mean, given the patch that I +1 this weekend in Java, where there was like some weird, like, you got to have this proxy file and there's a missing proxy listed and blah, 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 blah. It still feels like it's still a big hinky mess. And so I was just going to put it out there that there is no insult to me if someone decides to delete that. Because I think it was my decision. It was a unilateral decision to initially do it. And no one should feel obligated to keep carrying that thing around if it's a maintenance pain in the ass. So I was just putting that out there.
Noted. The CLI is quite useful for testing stuff, so it is kind of nice. So if it's,
but it's one of those things that, like, would you mind if the CLI took like a half a second longer to start?
I guess
you have
it's
a
one of those
CLI
nice that
that's
you can
jar-
just
a jar
download the CLI versus like having to download the product and run it.
Fair enough. Yeah. I don't know. Like it's like you could make a brew install like of the Isthmus CLI that's just jar files into JVM, and then you wouldn't have to deal with any of the. I don't know. There's other ways to do that. Like, so I have no strong feeling about it, and I just don't want anybody to feel like there's some like unwritten rule that it's going to hurt my feelings.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Noted.
Because I was really glad when I didn't have to work with that anymore. It was a lot of work to get that working. Getting Calcite to support Graal was unbelievable amounts of work.
Yeah.
There's a whole set of refactors I had to do inside of Calcite to even make it possible.
Oh yeah, that would be cursed.
Yeah, if you go look back 3 years ago about a bunch of contributions I did to Calcite, it's all about like getting it so that I can do like native compilation. There's too many things that were like opaque to the compiler at the wrong level and all sorts of nonsense. Yeah. Anyway, all right. Anything else people want to talk about?
I have a question about Substrate CPP. It's now maybe okay. I'm guessing from memories, from very vague memories, maybe about a year out of date. What's the
it hasn't been updated in a while. I haven't spent any time on it. I did get a PR from somebody who was updating the paths because there's apparently a 260 character limit in Windows.
Oh,
Fair.
Windows. Windows
So I
3
got a
this
patch,
year.
the patch for that. They were complaining about the the fact that the formatter runs on the entire code base and not just the change files. So I got to fix that. But
So my question was
yeah, a lot
specifically
of stuff.
aiming at the dependency, at the substrate dependency, because the version is still at 0.42.1.
Yeah, I mean, bumping that is not too bad. Except that when we do that, really the text is text to binary conversion needs to be updated because it needs to be able to support the new structures. And so that means that the visitor needs to change, and so it's not.
Does it need to
It's
support new
it's not
structures or
just
just
bumping a
crash
version.
or like fail if it doesn't have the new structures in it?
It means that if it saw those things, it wouldn't work. But if you're updating the version to say that it supports this version, it really ought to support that version. This was generated by version 70, but it's but I only handle the structures of the versions of structures of 43. Seems a little weird.
I'm not, Ingo, what is your question?
Basically,
Is the
what
question,
is
should I update it? Is the question, is it hard to update? Is the question like, is someone going to update it? I don't actually know what the question was. Sorry.
I think it was the last thing.
Yeah, I did. Maybe I didn't spell it out. Basically, I just want to know what is our ambition of recency of that dependency for Substrate CVP.
I think your ambition is it's up to date. I think nobody's relying on it, and so no one's working on it.
Yeah. So indirectly, why am I interested in this question? I found it useful to have the text format just for debugging. So currently, I don't import the proto definition directly, but through Substrate CVP. And now I'm wondering, should I continue to rely on that if it's only updated yearly?
If you're using it, then there's a purpose for us to spend a little bit of time to update it, especially if you're debug. Well, I mean, I guess you don't really care about some of these. I mean, you do probably care about being able to handle the new virtual table expressions, so that needs to be updated at least. And probably when precision time is in, you're going to care about that. So, I mean, if we were doing this regularly, the updates wouldn't be so ugly. Because we just update with whatever feature was since the last time, but because we haven't, it's a little bit more work the first time.
I think it would also be reasonable, just because there is such a large drift right now, to do the update and then fix the stuff that you know you're using as it comes up. I don't know how much work it is to get everything wired in, but if it's like a lot, it might make sense to just do it incrementally and just be like, yeah, this is.
Yeah, I really regret not making a visitor generator. Because then it would just be generated from the proto and it would have been nice, but yeah, I think that's reasonable. We could update them.
I also don't have an urgent need to update the substrate spec right now. Actually, that would create work for me as well for exactly the same reason and support all the changes. So I'm just asking out of curiosity, basically.
It should be done. I agree. But it's yeah, I think it needs to be done as a big thing.
I think nobody's going to do it unless you do it. I think that's the answer.
That's a fair answer.
Yeah, man, that's my gut. I mean, David, I don't know if you've got a bunch of free cycles or you're like, I'll just go do this weekend or something. Like,
my boss uses my free cycles for other things.
Yeah, I mean, I think my guess is that like we aren't using any of this stuff right now, and so it isn't going to become like to me, like business critical is the most easy way to get something done, right? Like, why are we putting precision time in? Because we have to. I don't want to do it. So yeah, I mean, we talked about using the text format, and if we start using it, I think that we would get more active there and start to push that thing forward. But it's like number 7 on the list right now for us. So until it gets to the top few, we probably aren't going to make any progress on it.
I feel like from an organization perspective, it sounds like y'all are using the Go binding, so you're pushing on that. At Datadog, we're using the Rust stuff and the Java stuff, which is where that gets pushed. I don't know if there's any large org depending on C++ in like a production way.
No.
I guess the Python stuff comes up because I think someone's using, like, some data people are using Python for something.
Yeah, data people always use Python for something. It's kind of weird.
Python is out of date too, though, isn't it? Or we're just updating we're just updating the version and then not actually updating the code.
The Python
So it looks
is pretty
up to date.
limited. I don't think they actually generate code. I think it's all runtime.
Okay.
All right. Anything else we want to talk about? Well, have fun in your time until we see each other again.
Yeah, thanks, y'all.
See
Bye.
you.